Welcome back to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. I'm your host, Mark Allison, and today I have another guest with me, and this is somebody from a sector of the industry we haven't spoken to or about as yet, and it's going to be great to get that input and insight. So first and foremost, how are you, Craig? Please introduce yourself.
Hello, Mark. I'm Craig Wiltshire, and I'm an assessor in the electrotechnical industry.
Lovely to meet you, and thanks again for agreeing to come on. And you have a unique point of view from the assessment side of the industry. It's going to be an interesting chat. I think a lot of people will get some benefit from this. So, respect for coming and having a chat with me. I appreciate it immensely. But first, before we get into any of that, let's hear a little bit about your background, if we may, where you first started out and came from.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. Well, first of all, Mark, thank you from behalf of all the apprentices, especially the guys I work with, for what you've done. And you've set up something that nobody has set up before. And I know it's something that's needed in the industry, and you've sort of opened that door, and long may it continue. So I'm very, very sort of privileged and proud to come on here tonight and just hopefully do my tiny little bit to help in what you're trying to achieve. So, from my point of view, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So just wanted to get
very kind.
But yeah, I left school, Mark, at 16, no qualifications at all, didn't really care. Lazy 16-year-old, a bit like my son, who's probably still in bed now from this morning. and I went straight into the army, and that was really my beginning in life. That's where I learned how to learn, to be honest. And I did 7 years, and I ended up working on radars and more electronics than electrics, to be honest. But I absolutely loved it, and I had to do a lot of courses, a lot of technical courses, and just something sparked in my brain, and I loved it. And I left after 7 years, and I suppose like a lot of people who are leaving the forces, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I drove a lorry for a bit, and I drove a taxi for a bit, and I did certainly bits and bobs. And anyway, I just sort of enrolled on an EAL course, just a basic electrical course. And because of my prior knowledge, I kind of flew through it, enjoyed it, and started my own company back in 2007. And it went really well. We kind of grew from strength to strength, took on a lot of people, started taking on apprentices and putting them through. But then I quickly realized that a lot of the apprentices were then becoming more qualified than myself, Mark, with what I had. And I was allowed to be in a CPS. I think we joined Alexa first, and then went to NIC approved contractors after that. And but anyway, I put myself through the MVQ, the MVQ3, did the AM2, and did the 2391, and got it all out of the way, and got myself up to speed, built the business. And I think during the business, we've put over 30 apprentices through ourselves. So something we were really passionate about right from the word go, and wanted to do it right, and like we had a lot of success. So we've seen this from an employer's angle and an assessor's angle, which has been absolutely invaluable for me going into assessing.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I mean, you having the insight coming into the industry really as an adult learner. You've got the insight of actually employing and training apprentices, and 30 of them, by the way, is fantastic. Brilliant work there. And now assessing other apprentices out with their employers today. You've probably got more experience than anyone else I've spoken to so far. And again, with the military, the last guest I had on, Stuart Cato, he's from a military background as well. And he was actually trained as an electrician while he was in the army or armed forces. So there's a lot of people coming through that route into the trades as well, I find. It seems quite a common point of entry when people leave the service. They tend to want to be electricians, or I guess that's all I would see, to be fair, because I am an electrician. But, there just seem to be quite a number of guys out there who've come that route. Sorry, Craig, carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the guys leaving the services are particularly motivated to succeed. That is the way. You don't know failure, and when you come out, you just want to achieve and keep achieving, and you've always got that drive to do something else. So it's very hard for people coming out of the services to settle down, because you've always wanted to achieve more, and that's kind of how I fell into this role, because We sold the business, and I was able to sort of take a little step back in life, which was quite nice, and got into assessing and teaching just by accident. I got a little bit bored, so I went to do a course in a local college. Ended up getting sort of friendly with the owner, and he offered me a job. I didn't have any teaching or assessing qualifications, but he put me through all my teaching and assessing qualifications that I needed, and I ended up working for them for a little while. And that's it. And that's how I got where I am today.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, you say you kind of fell into the teaching side of things. How did that actually start off? Is there, I mean, you say about the courses, is it difficult to become qualified in the actual teaching aspect? So not just the knowledge about the electrical industry, but actually teaching people, that's a skill in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends on the type of person you are. You've got to be fairly confident. Again, I've got to thank my military background for that, because that's all about sort of self-confidence. And I'm a fairly confident guy, to be honest. So you've got to be able to stand up in front of a room of people. You've got to be able to. I sort of developed a method for my teaching. I didn't like the idea of teacher at front of class, learner sitting in a row. It's just not me. So I called it sort of teaching from within. So I just kind of. My classes, they're sat in circles, not in rows. And, I'm in the middle, the learners are in the middle, and everyone's just learning through having a chat, really, more than anything. And, none of this strict, you will learn this by Tuesday. Some will, some won't. But, teaching from within and creating a collaborative team in a class has always been my way. And I've applied it to my teaching over the last 3 years, and it's really, really worked a treat. But, Mark, my view of teaching and colleges and assessing when I was an employer to my view of it now, it was completely different to what I thought. I'm not a negative person, and I don't really want to put a negative spin on this, but there is a lot wrong at the moment with the way apprentices are treated. I was like, all right, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Let's have a chat. And he told me he's picking on me. He's asking me questions I don't know. When I don't know him, I feel small in the class, and the boys are taking the mick. And so I said, all right, that's not right. I agree with you. I'm gonna sort of take this further. So me and him went to see the safeguarding officer, and we sat down, and I said, look, this is a situation. This is what's happening. We need to sort this. What are we going to do about it? And her answer to me, Mark, was, if it was you, Craig, we could do something about it, because you're an employee. That teacher owns the college, so that's it. There's nothing we can do. And this was said in front of the learner, right? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't accept that answer, No. We forced the issue again a bit more. So we got the owner in, sat down, and the attitude was, it was shocking. What's your problem? What's your problem with me? And I'm like, look, this guy's broken down in tears. You know what I mean? He's obviously struggling. We can't do that. And that was the attitude, though. No, it's the owner. Can't do nothing about it. If it was you, fine. And that just got me thinking, I just can't be here. Like, I can't.
I can understand that entirely. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very good situation at all. And I've spoken to, we're speaking about the colleges and the lecturers now. I've spoken to a number of those, and it does seem that we have issues in colleges around the treatment of apprentices. Not just in regards to bullying and the point you've raised there, but in access to decent materials and equipment to work with, enough teaching hours into each individual apprentice. It does seem to be that it's like a numbers game. You've kind of alluded to that a little bit in what you've mentioned, and, profit rather than getting the right training and skills into the individuals. They're just seen as a cash cow to a certain degree. Is that something that you observed while you was in lecturing?
Concentrating them 5 learners, and no matter what, they have got to get through, or we will get penalised. And that's wrong. I mean, that is, and that's not just the subcontractor's fault. They're under tremendous financial pressure as well. It's the funding provider are giving this pressure. So they're not looking at the learner's capability, their mental state. They're not looking at their ability to do the job, who they're employed with. It's just a case of, we need 5 to get through, to hit our targets, get them through. End of chat. And it just blew my mind, Mark. It really did. It was.
I know,
Absolutely.
I can imagine, and that's the I've heard that story from a few other people. I mean, I do have to kind of say against that as well that there's a number of lecturers who have got really positive experiences in their college. So I don't think it's around every single training organisation, but there's certainly a number of them out there. You know, it's how that's tackled though, because as you've said yourself, when the guy who's doing a lot of the bad things is the ultimate owner of that training company, you know, how does that even get stopped or sorted out to begin with? You know, what's your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
it's difficult, and it's a double-edged sword. And I feel for the subcontractors. They're getting pressurized by the funding providers, but ultimately, the people who are getting squeezed the most is the learners. But I suppose the way I feel, it's up to people like me to turn that around. And being the type of person I am, I'm no shrinking violet, Mark, shall we say? So I'm fairly willing to stand up and and stand my ground for the boys. And I know I've put it out there, and a few ideas have come to light. And it was mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago that some kind of apprentice union might be a good idea, and that's something I thought. I sort of come on and thought about it, and I was like, you know what? That would be a good idea, and it would be an even better idea if it was funded by the funding providers. Get these guys to sign up. They could have an independent person to go to, not connected to the college, not connected to the subcontractor, just not connected to an assessor, but just a number they can ring. Look, I've got a problem with my college. Is there someone that can help? Boom. Yeah, there is. Yeah. And I think that's a great idea and something really that could be explored further.
That is a good idea. I totally agree. I mean, that's something that would be fantastic, and we should certainly maybe have a chat about that between us if we can help in any way through Apprentice 1-to-1 in making that happen. I would be more than delighted to do so. It's something that's needed, I think, because as you've said, apprentices at the minute are kind of left in limbo a lot of the time. There's so many people who've got in touch with myself since I started this little adventure, last year, and the support that they don't get from the colleges and from their employers, they're just kind of they're left without anywhere to go. And that there is like the JTL do bits, but there's nothing on a national level where somebody can reach out for that kind of help. So that's a really good shout, Craig, to actually look at putting something in place.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that'll just to give these guys somewhere to go where they can vent. I mean, I would say, like, out of a class of 30 over the course of a 12-month period, 12 would have come to me and broke down over one issue or another. And it's not just work. I mean, Mark, you know what it's like. I know what it's like when you've taken boys on. You don't just take them on. You take on their wives, their girlfriends, their mum and dad. You become like this, like dad to all these people, and you to keep them productive, to keep them working. In our case, to keep them learning, they got to be happy. And the mental health side of this has got to be addressed. And the days of apprentices being treated on site the way I suppose me and you might have been treated, Mark, is you can't do things like that anymore, and rightly so. And the whole mental health side of it has to be addressed as well. And I think it's a massive issue. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead right. And there's a number of people now starting to speak up regarding mental health. And that's fantastic because certainly through most of my working life up to maybe the last 5 years or so, it was a taboo subject. It was something that was never discussed. And I know Sam's started a podcast up entirely about mental health now, and there's other people starting movements on social media, and then people like yourself who are discussing it as well. It's all good, and if we can get that into the minds of apprentices from a young age, that if you are suffering and struggling in that way, there's no shame or stigma to it. You need to reach out and get help. That's a good message to give to them, I think.
Absolutely. And I think when we're talking about employers as well, I think employers do get a bit of financial support, and obviously nowhere near enough, in my opinion, but it is what it is, I suppose, at the end of the day. But I was just having a little look through the 820230, which is the new NVQ that the guys have got to do. And there is an employer sort of liability built into that NVQ now, Mark. I didn't know if you've gone through the qualification.
Yes.
But I don't know. Again, I think in a way it's good, but in a way it's going to put a lot more pressure on the employers without the support. Yes. So I don't quite know. I mean, I read specifically today in the City and Guilds release that without that employer support section being signed off, they can't get the qualification. So it's difficult enough as it is for employers with having an apprentice on board. I mean, I know some really, really good employers. There's a couple of guys I've come across who, I mean, I'm personal friends with them now. There's a company down in Newport, CW Electrical, and out of all the people I've ever dealt with, that man treats his apprentices like kings, and you know, to get a place with him is a career move from the gods, you know. But I've also come across some really bad employers as well, and being the assessor, you know, you're essentially there just to go and check their work, check that it's all going well. But it goes way beyond that. You know, you have to get emotionally involved with these guys. And I've had conversations with employers, and when you bring it up, and the employer can get quite aggressive, you know, and because they don't think there's anything wrong, and you've had to sit them down and say, you know, listen, you know, you've treated this guy in this way, and you know that's not right. Like you can't do that, and it's not fair. And this employer support is something that is needed to be looked at 100%, and especially with this new qualification, I think it's not been thought through as much as it could have been with regards to how are we going to support these employers to provide what the qualification is requiring, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, the large employers who've got the HR departments and little training bits of their businesses to put the apprentices into, they can cover all those things, you know, relatively with relative ease. But smaller employers, specifically with like 10 lads and less, even one-man bands, if you're putting more paperwork burden on them or confusion in things they need to be filling in and keeping on top of, it's just another roadblock to them actually taking on apprentices. And if they do, actually running the apprenticeship properly. You know, and coming back onto the funding as well with the grants, there's been the COVID grants that they put in place. I don't know if you've had a look or seen any of those, but it's kind of buried within a website within a website. It's not very accessible or user friendly. You know, it seems like it's set up to stop people being encouraged to do it, which should be the opposite, really, especially at the moment. So we need better support for employers, and as you rightly raised the point around the funding, better funding as well. So, you know, that could maybe tie in with the apprenticeship union. You know, maybe there's something that could be done for the apprentices and the employers as a collaborative.
Yeah, and I think the more sort of people that get that idea about forming this union, the better. Especially if we can get people a little higher up, people with a little bit more legal knowledge than you know than ourselves. Just to sort of think, you know what, we do need this is needed for the industry in my point of view, and I think that could be the basis of something, you know, big to come in the future. I'm trying to think of a few other things I've come across which has baffled me. I'll tell you one thing was discouraging the guys to sit the 2391 initially, and it was kind of said like, well, you need to be out there for a good couple of years before you do that, you know. And I sort of sat down and had to think about it. And I teach a pre-AM2 as well, right? And I've got a fairly good course running. And I was having a little think about it, and I was like, no, I think that statement's wrong. I think any kind of CPD is good, you know. So we did a little test, and I paid for one of the apprentices in the college. I said, look, I'm going to book this 2391 for you, and I just want to see what you can do with it. Like, so, you know, I did a deal with a training provider, so it was like, let's just have an experiment. Well, you know what? He did the pre-AM2 course with me. He went down, he did the 2391, flew the 2391, all the information from the regs, from the testing units, the health and safety, it was all in his brain, right? And absolutely nailed it. And as it turns out, right, because he'd had his 18th regs and his 2391, he decided to quit his job, and he set up on his own, joined the CPS. I think he joined NIC, and he was a way to go before he even qualified. And I thought, if there was ever a case for encouraging CPD, that's it right there. Like that guy had his own business before leaving school.
I mean, that's the old age argument, and I've actually had this discussion with Neil Bridgman, who's another podcaster. He's of the opinion that you should have a few years' experience before you even consider it, and I don't like to put that tag onto people. If you've got the ability and the knowledge and the capability, your age shouldn't be a barrier. I do get what he's saying about having a requirement for experience across a whole range of installations, and it's, you know, it's just impractical to expect somebody to have that at a young age because you haven't seen and been where you haven't had a chance to go and do it yet, have you? But certainly with my apprentice, who's my last apprentice with my son Matthew, he did his 2391 at 19 years old and passed it. I'd have no qualms in sending him to do inspection and testing anywhere now when he's 23 years old. So, I mean, it's not a one fit all. I think we should be encouraging CPD from a young age. And if someone's capable of doing the 2391, I say go for it, go and get on with it.
I agree 100%. I never discourage anyone from it. But to see it being actively discouraged to me was just an alien concept. So I thought, no, let's move on from that. But a big thing that's coming up. Sorry, go on, Mark.
No, you carry on.
Yeah, a big thing that's coming up with all the apprentices now is JIB Gold Card. That's all everybody's talking about now. My JIB card.
That was what I was going to say. So you took the words out of my mouth there.
Yeah, it's a massive subject, and this is probably one we could talk about for 3 weeks. I would have thought. My position at the moment is because I had the experience with that college. I went to work for another college down in Cardiff. And again, I don't want to put a negative spin on it, but it was even worse. So I wasn't there very long, and I decided to leave and just go freelance, which was the best thing I ever did. And I'm kind of involved now with apprentices, funded and private, and experienced worker apprentices, in particular the new 2346 experienced worker one. Steam coming out of the ears at this point. And it's not going to end up a fair system, I don't think. I mean, if we just take the 8202 units, for example, right? Electrical science isn't covered in the 2346 at all. Wow. So there's no mathematics involved, no cable calculations. You don't even have to have a level 2 or a level 3 qualification to get on that course. It's just 5 years experience and a skill scan. And that's it.
Wow! I didn't know that. That's news to me.
It's bananas. And they've got to do the AM2E, they've got to do the 2391, and they've got to do the 18th regs. And when I've spoken about this to authorities, it's just been, they've proved competence for testing because they've done 2391, they've done AM2E, so the installation, testing, fault finding, building regs, etc. is covered, and 18th regs proves that they know the regs, and then you will assess them on their competency in the workplace. But practically, I don't know. I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion, I've got nothing against experienced workers. I went down one myself, but I'm just think that as electricians, you're going to have two guys on site, one that's going to have done a 4 or 5 year apprenticeship, and has worked damn hard for that, and you've got one that's maybe been a cable puller for 5 years, but they've got the same gold card on the same rate of pay. And I'm not sure how that's going to work out in the long run, to be honest, Mark. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, that's a really difficult subject, and I've spoken about this with every single guest who's come onto the podcast. The last one been Stuart, and again, he served his time in the military. He did the version of the AM2 in there, but it's not an accepted version by the JIB, so he can't get his gold card. He's an engineering technician. He's well qualified as an electrician and perfectly competent as one. So maybe that kind of route for somebody like that is a valid one, rather than, as your example, somebody who's been cable pulling or metal munching, whatever we want to call it, and not really got that breadth of experience and knowledge to then be able to go off and get a gold card without all of the required work. Doesn't sound especially fair, does it? Really, it's. I can understand from the JIB's point of view why they do have to set a mark in the sand somewhere, and once they've set it, rather than then making ways to circumvent it, if you like, doesn't sit right with me. But I do also get there are people who maybe haven't had the training and qualifications they needed in the past. I mean, going back I think there was a period in the late 90s, early 2000s, where there was some issue with the courses that people were put on, and in good faith they qualified as electricians, but now for whatever reason those don't qualify for getting a JIB gold card.
Yeah, it puts it's open for abuse, in my opinion, through training providers. I mean, this is all done through private providers, Mark, right? So yes, you've got to do a skill scan. And yes, you've got to make sure they've got 5 years experience. That's fine. And I am fortunate that I work with some really, really decent and good training providers. And if I didn't, I just wouldn't work for them. It's not the way I operate. But I work for a couple of companies now that are very stringent with regards to, if you do the skill scan, even if you get into it and you cover the first 2 or 3 questions and the guy doesn't know, stop there, you need to go away and do a level 2 or 3 and come back. And that's what I'm looking for. But I just fear, and I've encountered the more unscrupulous training providers who will be, get them through, take their money off them. It's open for abuse, and it scares me, to be honest. And I think that that is going to cause problems, and it's going to need to be looked at certainly in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally see that, because it would devalue the gold card as a whole, wouldn't it? If you've got, if everybody's got one and the skills related to that card kind of drop away. I mean, Sam mentioned it on the podcast he came on, where you can actually buy a version of the NVQ anyway. There's companies out there where you can go off and pay to have a portfolio filled in for you, and just send them a few pictures of yourself doing a bit of work. So even the actual NVQ itself, is open to abuse. And while those loopholes are there, it's kind of, should we even be holding that up as the benchmark? It's quite a difficult subject area, and I think we need to get that in order, along with a few of the other things as well in the industry. I mean, we've got the short course issue as well that's been brewing up over the last 15 years or so. So there is aspects around education and training that we do need to get sorted out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've often looked at the sort of gas safe structure, and I mean, if you speak to a gas guy, I mean, that's not perfect by any means. I think it would take a tremendous amount of work to get a competent person scheme that is perfect. But what I would say for ourselves, like if we've got an electrician and he's got 12 guys working for him, they could be carpenters, they could be butchers. It doesn't matter. He's got that CPS. He's fine, right? A gas safe structure is the guy that owns a company's gas safe, his gas fitters are gas safe. They've all got that qualification, and I the way the industry's going, I think we need something like that. I kind of think the JIB's got that in mind, the way they're pushing the gold card and the NVQs at the moment. So I think overall it can be a good thing, but it just needs to be managed correctly, and I think that'll sort it out then.
Yeah, I mean, there does seem, I mean, you raised the issue there of gas safe, and we know the world of gas have just gas safe. The thing we have in the electrical industry is there's these fragments of different bodies all over the place. So we've mentioned the JIB, but we've also got the IET. There is all of the CPS providers, and they seem to change around week to week with who owns who in that particular area. And there's the ECA as well, who are kind of part of that, but not. And it just seems that all of those people are kind of competing against each other rather than working together. So I don't know if we maybe need to look towards maybe having something that sits over all of that and encompasses it in some way. And it's a hard one to solve, but I don't think it's right at the moment, and it's not been right for a number of years.
No, and I think 99.9% of electricians would agree with you on that point, Mark. I think the thing that, from an assessor's point of view, that I think goes a little bit awry sometimes is it's very rare that assessors, people on the ground, foot soldiers like myself, we're not involved in these qualifications. So when this 2346 was designed, and whoever it was designed by, they can't have got input from the likes of us, because every assessor that I've spoken to, and I know a lot of people, right, but every one of them I've spoken to have all said, how is it possible that there's no pre-qualification? How is it possible that these guys haven't done any exams? I mean, how is it possible that in theory you can get a guy who doesn't know Ohm's law a gold card? It's just not, like, and everybody's saying the same thing, and I sort of took a step back and I'm thinking, well, let's just ask the question, which I did, to which you just don't get answers to. But I think when they're designing these qualifications, to have a little body of assessors, IQAs, and an EV maybe, to just say, right, okay, this is what we're proposing. What do you think? I know they put it out to public scrutiny, but it's created by them, and that's it. And there's no backtracking. There's no, oh, we made a bit of an error there, For example, like the 235699 experience worker NVQ was fantastic. The guys had to have a level 2, a level 3. They had to have an initial interview, and I've assessed hundreds of them, Mark, and out of I would say out of 200 people, 180 were spot on and they knew their stuff. 20 might have been struggling for different reasons, dyslexia, emotional reasons, bits and bobs. But I mean, they knew, they had prior knowledge, and the level 2 and level 3 is not easy. You know, you've got to sit all the exams, you've got to sit the building regs, you've got to sit the electrical science, you've got to sit the health and safety, and they've got that knowledge. They know safe isolation. The amount of people that don't know safe isolation that are trying to come on at the moment is just ridiculous. And that's something I think is going to cause a safety issue as well. I really do. And it's something that I'm just constantly questioning, but not got many answers to yet, Mark, to be honest.
No, I mean, and that's the whole purpose of my little podcast, really, is just to gather people's opinions and thoughts on things. We don't have to have the answers. It's a really difficult issue to actually do something about because of all the different, things that aren't quite right and the different bodies and people involved with it. And you made a good point there about assessors. You kind of have a better handle on things than anybody else in the industry because you're speaking with the colleges, the employers, and the apprentices. I mean, you're seeing things with the external verifiers and city and guilds as well. So, I mean, you guys and girls having input into that should surely be invaluable. I mean, I don't understand why they're not seeking that resource of knowledge right now.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's something to do with us and some people stepping outside the box and suggesting that, and there's maybe somebody like me pushing that issue, which going forward, I'm pretty sure my mouth will get me in trouble more than once in my life. But well, what can you do? But I mean, on the positive side of it, though, I mean, the apprentices that I have put through, or the majority of them, the quality is really good. And I had a bit of an argument with an older electrician the other day. He's putting a guy down about the AM2, and he said, "Oh, back in my day, the AM2 was much harder." And I'll tell you now, Mark, I actually, when I sort of started thinking about going into teaching, I thought, no, I'm going to do the AM2 again just to see what these guys are going through now. So, as crazy as it sounds, I decided to put myself through that hell twice in my lifetime. And I got to be honest, every single one of those boys that passed that AM2, I would shake their hand and work with them because I think it's fairly tough. And, I think I finished my install with like 7 minutes to go or something, and I had a bit of a sweat on it. And, and I certainly didn't get top marks. I've been in this game a long time, and I'm never going to claim to be the best or anything. But I thought to myself, you know what? The guys that pass this exam deserve that badge. They really do. And I think that's where the contention may come in. And
no, it's definitely a contentious area, and you hear that a lot, not just around AM2, but the 239 one as well. And it's like historical, going back to when I first came into being an electrician, where the guys before would say, "Oh, you've got it so much easier now with these power tools, and the types of cables you're installing are so much better, and you've got all this test equipment." So I think things move along like that anyway, and the people coming through now, the training they're going through isn't their fault. They're taking the courses in front of them, and the ones who are excelling at it, we should be praising and supporting them, not trying to drag them down by making out that we had it so much harder. We're all electricians at the end of the day, aren't we? And if you can help somebody by supporting them and passing on your knowledge rather than trying to think that you're better than them, I don't understand that mindset, to be fair.
Every day's a school day. But while we're talking about testing, one of the major problems I've got, like with my apprentices, one of the major top issues they come back to me with every single time, my employer won't let me test. And it's huge, Mark. It is absolutely massive. The employers seem, for some reason, they've either got testers that just go in and test afterwards, and the apprentices get no look at that whatsoever, or they just don't trust them to do it. How to fill certificates in. I mean, I get third and fourth years coming in, and I'm like going through an R1 plus R2 test with them, and I'm like, haven't you done this in work yet? And they're like, they won't let me touch a tester. Show me, how you would do a ZS on that socket outlet then. And they're looking at the tester like it might as well be a piece of alien equipment, like, they haven't got a clue. Yeah. So again, like, it comes back to the employers. They do need to be involved, but the employer needs to be supported as well. And they need to be, they need to be included in this NVQ, but not in a way where they're scrutinized. So it's like, let's include you, but look, we need these guys to do testing. We need them to install to an excellent standard. Nobody's disputing that. But these guys are going to progress all their lives. So if they could get them on testing in that sort of third year, it would be brilliant. But they're so reluctant to do it. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, no, and that's that. I mean, you've literally read my Instagram inbox, I think, because that's the kind of messages I'm getting all of the time from apprentices right now. And I know it's a little bit different now because they're not at work generally anyway, or at college. So getting that experience of testing is really difficult. But even in normal times, you make a great point. It is true. You know, whether it is to a lack of time that employers want to put into testing and actually allowing apprentices to do it, or if they're worried about their abilities to do it correctly. I mean, I don't know. It's something that they should be doing, because if you don't have the experience and training on it out on the job, then you know where you expect to learn it at the end of the day.
Well,
But and even now I'm being asked by apprentices, is the content online that we can go and look at? And there is. You can go and watch YouTube videos. I mean, there's the stuff Sparky Ninja puts out, and you know, you've got GSH and Gary Hayes when the things he does. Even I've had a go at a couple of videos, but it doesn't replicate actually doing it yourself and getting that test instrument in your hands. The nuances of working it, you know, it's something that apprentices should be allowed and encouraged to do 100%.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it comes down to employers. I always sort of try and explain it to the apprentices. I try and give them an example of how it's working, and they don't understand why. And I'm like, look, the employers, we've installed this and they've gone out. What have they done? Oh, he went out, he did a ZE, he did an insulation resistance, and the cert was done, 2 minutes flat, right? And I'm like, okay, but what your employer's doing, he's effectively, when he's on his driving test and the instructor sitting next to him, he's mirror signal maneuver, right? But Nan's out there, he's just push, bash, bash, bump, and he's get in and out, and that's the way it is, isn't it? And so it's, I think, a little bit of complacency on the employer, rushing the job. I mean, we want to get paid, I understand that, but they're doing it in front of the apprentices the incorrect way. So these guys are just coming into college going, yeah, well, yeah, you just turn it off, don't you? Well, no, you don't. You do safe isolation. And then we've got a sequence of tests that we follow. And the knowledge is just not there. And it's definitely related to what they're seeing on site.
Yeah, 100%. And the safe isolation thing is a big deal. That's something that apprentices need to be aware of from right at the beginning, really, to get that mindset of working safely and making sure you're isolating and locking off correctly is huge. I've tried to do a little bit of that in my own way through Apprentice 1-to-1 with some giveaways of the safe isolation kits. And there's other people kind of trying to share that message as well. But employers ultimately should be leading that in the way they demonstrate working safely on site. And you probably know as well as I do that doesn't happen as often as it should, sadly. So yeah, there is that issue. Looking at the colleges again a little bit, though, you mentioned before about a subcontracting college. What actually is that? Because I've never heard of that before.
Okay, so you get a main funding provider, and then you'll have a sub college. So the main funding provider will give the college funding for X amount of apprentices per year, and then they will claim that money, and they will have that allocated amount of money and time to get them apprentices through. And it's just like being a subby. So you've got the main contractor, which is I don't know, somebody like Cardiff and Vale College, and then you'll have another little college off them who will take those apprentices off them for a certain amount of money to get them through in a certain amount of time. But that is where the targets come in. So it's like, yeah, we'll give you this amount of money. However, you have to get 90% of them through. They can't be late going through. You can't have any early leavers, you know. And let's face it, out of 100 people, 90 of them are not gonna pass. It's just, it seems to me that the target-driven side of it is what's really pulling it down, and it's putting massive pressure on that subcontractor, and in turn, it's putting massive pressure on the assessors to sort of keep trying to turn these guys over. And you know, there's some people that they're just not cut out for it, Mark. They'll get there and they think, oh, do you know what? I can't really be bothered now, and you know, I want to go and be a truck driver or whatever. Fine, you know. But there's the pressure there to keep them in and get them through, and come on, you know, push them through. And the time it takes to get a guy through who doesn't want to go through, it's ridiculous. It's 10 times amount more time than you would spend on a guy that really wants it, you know. And I think removing those targets, for me, is the fundamental part. Let's get the people through who want to go through. And I think, right, Mark, that's how we're going to build the quality in the industry, because you've got the guys there who really want to be there. And if some fall by the wayside, so be it. But to bring a financial penalty in for that, to me, it's creating a pressure that doesn't need to be there at all. The money's there either way. And how do we know what we want to be? I mean, when I left school with no qualifications and I joined the army, I didn't know I'd end up, where I got to. So there we are.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. You don't know what you really want to do at that age in a lot of cases. And many people who end up kind of pushed towards apprenticeships and things have dropped out of other areas or not succeeded academically. And, they're even less likely to have actually chosen to be there, in a majority of cases in some colleges. So you make a great point there to do with the numbers and just hitting targets rather than trying to get that knowledge into the right students. It's maybe something that needs to be looked at in the way that's all set up. 100%. I agree with you.
Absolutely.
So looking at your role now and how things have moved along through coronavirus, I don't imagine you're out on site assessing very many people at the moment. Has there been any kind of technological development where you've got a robo version of yourself out on site? What's actually happening in the day job?
Robo Craig, Mark, to be honest. I've never been on site so much in my life, just remotely. I think... and again, I always try and take the positives out of situations. And I think coronavirus was and is an ideal opportunity to move our assessing into the 21st century. And for me, it's been absolutely fantastic. I can engage with more learners, whereas before I'd maybe get 2 site visits in a day. I can get 5 or 6 in a day now. I can do professional discussions on Zoom like we're doing now, calling the evidence up, sharing the evidence. My questioning skills have improved. I can adapt each and every assessment to that particular learner for the assessment that's in front of me without as much pressure. I mean, there's always going to be a bit of pressure, Mark, right? But for me, it's opened up a whole new world of assessing. And I think going forward, it would be foolish to not keep pursuing this. You can put yourself anywhere in the country at any given time. You can offer advice, you can offer assessing, you can offer teaching and learning, you can offer support emotionally, mental health support, and it's all there right in front of you from the convenience of the house. And I don't really see the point or the need of going onto site anymore, because this has opened up this avenue for us, which in my opinion and in my experience of what I've seen, it's improved me as an assessor. But I've been able to give a lot more to my learners. I've not got those time constraints. If I was spending an hour on site with a guy and then I had to be 2 hours away on another site the same day, I'm always under pressure to get there. And is he going to wait for me? Is he going to go home? Is he going to be at lunch? Now it's like, I can give that time to that guy, 100% of my time without any distractions. And I feel I give a lot more because I can, and I feel they're absorbing a lot more, and certainly in the assessments that I'm producing. And I know my IQA will agree with me here, that the assessments are a lot better and they are positive, and the learners that are going through, they know more and they understand more. And if they don't, we can deliver it to them there and then on the spot straight away. Share resources, absolutely fantastic. So for me, massive positive.
I mean, that sounds really exciting. Yeah, I can see in the way you're speaking about it that it's something that you're passionate about in using going forward. And, it's good to see any kind of positive that's come from coronavirus, because, you maybe would never have realized this, not under normal times, because you'd still be running around assessing out on site. And like you say, it makes perfect sense because, you can see and speak with the learners still through Zoom. You can do all of your assessing remotely. You can still see installations and things with all the technology we've got now. And with the environmental impact as well, where you're not chasing around the country in a vehicle, there's winds all around there. So I think that's a really good thing, and I'm glad to hear that you're thriving with it and enjoying it. That's great.
Well, I'll give you an example of how our learners can be helped directly on the spot with this. So I was doing an assessment of a guy doing a sequence of tests on an observation the other day, right? And he done an install, and he just said, "Look, I've done this install, Craig. Can I do a full test on it for you?" Yeah, brilliant, right? But I had another learner who really was struggling with testing. So I said, no problem, Zoom invite, right? He's going to do the testing, you're going to watch him. I'm going to assess it. So we had an assessment, an observation, and a teaching and learning session in one. And the chances of that happening if my feet were on the ground, is zero. I'm not going to go to one site, get another guy, take him to another site, introduce him, but within an hour and a half, I had one learner, he's chuffed to bits because he's been assessed, his progress has gone up, happy days. I had another learner who was like, oh yeah, that makes sense now, yeah, I understand how to do that. And I actually had the learner who was doing the testing explaining to the other learner. I had to do very little work, really, because it was being done by each other. But that was a perfect example of how technology was used, and a massive positive for me, and certainly something I'll be carrying forward.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a great example, and to be able to get your abilities and skills around more apprentices is a fantastic thing. And if technology can help do that, amazing. And again, looking at kind of online learning, that's another thing that's developed and cropped up more as coronavirus times have developed. And I have seen recently that City and Guilds are even allowing people to take regulation courses at home and such. How do you feel about all of that? The new online learning, not just through City and Guilds, but other bits and pieces that are popping up all over the place. Is that
I'm a massive advocate of technology. I've always thought companies that have not embraced technology have always failed. So you've got to keep up with the times. I do have slight concerns with exams, Mark, if I'm honest, because when you're online, the cheating ability is there. And no matter what anybody can say, if you're in an exam room and you're being supervised, then you can't cheat. It's as simple as that. So I'm all for online learning. I think online learning is absolutely fantastic. I'm not a really great lover of the idea of doing exams online. I think that needs to be looked at quite strictly, because if I wanted to pass an exam online, I know I could get the materials in front of me and nobody would ever know. So yeah. Online learning, though, I think it's the way ahead. And there's nothing we can't learn online. 2391 we can learn online. EV charging, regs, everything we do can be learned online. And that's, I'm living proof of that, because I'm involved in all them sort of courses, especially online as well. But I wouldn't feel comfortable about somebody taking an exam of that magnitude online. That for me would be, they'd need to go to a centre and do that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page as that, to be honest, that you can do the learning at home and at your own time and convenience. That's the great thing to do. You can go at your own pace, and all of the other information that you might need to reference is there as well. But certainly, as you referenced, you can't control the cheating aspect. If somebody's at home in their own house, it's very easy, I think, to be able to manipulate that to your own benefit if you was to want to. And while a majority of people probably wouldn't, there will always be some that do. So I'm on that page that the exams should probably be in a controlled environment away from a person's own home. But I have heard actually recently from some of the apprentices that they're kind of been assessed for their testing inspection by certain colleges via video link at home, and some of their exams as part of their NVQ training have been done at home as well. So it's something that is actually happening right now, and a few of them have said they're not actually comfortable with that because they haven't had the training in college over the last year or so, and they haven't had the training out on site. And yet, as you've kind of referenced already with the things that go on in certain colleges, they've been pushed towards completing these parts of their assessment to get them through the door and get them finished. And while they want to be qualified electricians, they don't want to be stood there trying to get a job not knowing what they're doing. So it's quite a difficult position to end up being in, isn't it?
It's a double-edged sword, I think, because on one hand, you want to progress the person, you want to stretch them, you want to make sure that you're pushing them all the time. But on the other hand, you want to give them the practical hands-on experience as well. So I think that is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. They can be assessed. I've had situations where guys have been 90% through and they've just got an observation of maybe some live testing and safe isolation in order to be signed off. And they've come, Craig, I've been furloughed. I'm off for the next 4 months. And I've had to sort of think outside the box and say, right, okay, no problem. Look, you've got a tester. You've got an electrical system at home. When I make the learning plan, I just simply put it at the top. This learner's doing this in his own house. It is a simulation, but it's a simulation because COVID and blah, blah, blah. So I think extreme situation, then maybe we could bend the rules slightly. I think going forward and using technology as a main base of sort of assessing learners and teaching learners, absolutely fantastic and would definitely benefit everybody concerned, but just maybe not so much for the stuff we can make sure that we have to assess them face-to-face or exams, that needs to be remained.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that entirely. I just want to actually ask you, because you mentioned that you have employed 30 apprentices in the past when you used to have an electrical contracting business. Do you have any advice for employers about building a business up utilising apprentices? Because a lot of them, kind of are put off from taking some of those steps. And I know myself, when you hire that first person, it's such a daunting and scary thing to do. And I often wonder, I could easily have never done that. But what advice would you have for an employer sat in that situation at the minute?
Okay, it's all about fear. I was at the situation in the very beginning where it was me and two apprentices, and all that was on my mind was some weeks I'm paying these apprentices more than I'm paying myself, and it can be like that. But what I kind of learned over the years was, to build your business, you need to invest your time and your money and your knowledge into these guys, and they will build that business for you. As long as you give them the best that you can be, you will build your business from zero up to however big you want to go, really. In I wouldn't say a massive short space of time, but time will go by like that. So try not to be afraid of it. Try not to think about, I know it's hard, we've all got to earn money, and I appreciate that. But the old saying, Mark, fortune favours the brave. I've got so much to be grateful for the electrical industry, right? I worked hard. I invested in my business. I gave my 100% to my apprentices. I didn't get them all through, unfortunately, but I think out of 30, we got 31, we got 25 through, which for me was absolutely fantastic. They're all practicing electricians in their own right now. They've all got their own businesses. And it allowed me to build the business to such a point where I was in a position to pass it on and take a chunk of money out of it, pay the mortgage off, and sort of put my feet up a bit. I'm only 46. I know I look younger, Mark, but I was able to pursue what I wanted to do, which was give more back. And the way I wanted to do that was through teaching and assessing, which I feel in life I've hit a really, really good thing. And like we were saying earlier about pushing yourself on, I'm now going on to do IQA, and I've just started that little journey. So. But what I would say is, try not to be afraid. Just if you're a good tradesman, and if you know your stuff and you can pass that stuff on to your apprentice, let them go out and work for you. Don't be afraid to buy them a van. Don't be afraid to teach them testing. Don't be afraid to give them everything you've got in your mind. They're not going to steal it off you, which is what a lot of people think. They're not going to undercut you. There's some bad eggs. There's bad eggs in every walk of life, but the good ones will be loyal to you. If you treat them right, they will treat you right. And it's what happened to me, and I'd be forever grateful for that. And I wish them all absolutely 100% the best, but just don't be afraid to go for it.
That's brilliant advice, and you've hit a lot of nails bang on the head there. So thanks for mentioning that. I totally agree with everything you've said. You do have to have that bravery to take the first step, and once you start walking down that road, it can transform your life, as you've said for yourself. You've given a great example there of what can happen. So fantastic. And you've kind of lent towards your positive benefits of the electrical industry. We do often highlight a lot of the negatives and things we don't like, and to hear those positive stories that, it's given you a great life. You've enjoyed your career so far in it, as have I. How do you see it going forward? Do you see that the electrical industry has a lot of good prospects, as we move on in the next 10 years or so?
Mark, I'm so glad you brought this point up. Of course it is. Everything, our industry is like a tree, and there's so many branches for people to go off once they get this NVQ. Everything's going to be electric cars, right? Wind turbines, solar power. It's all geared up to eco. I think gas boilers are going to stop getting fitted into new build properties very shortly in a couple of years. So it's all going to be heat pumps, ground source, air source. The whole country is geared up towards using electricity as opposed to anything else. So I get the guys that say, "Oh, the industry's rubbish. It's not what it was." No, absolutely. Don't listen to them. If an apprentice is watching now and you're working with an old sweaty sock, right, and he's saying to you, "Oh, this is a crap industry. It's not what it used to be. It's bloody gone to the..." It hasn't. It's just at the very beginning of what it's going to be. Our industry is growing at the biggest rate of any industry in the whole country, and it's only going to get bigger. Construction's going to get bigger. House building's going to get bigger. There's more people getting born, so there's more houses going to be need to build. There's more houses going to be need to maintain. environmentally friendly technologies. Guys, this is the wagon to jump on right now. You know, people are saying about EV, right? Electric vehicles. It's not going to work. It doesn't matter whether it's going to work or not. The government think it's going to work, so the government are going to invest in it, and you're going to get paid for it. So jump on it, do it, get on these courses, and just absolutely punch it out of the ballpark, because the money is definitely there to be made. But just put the negatives away and just grab this industry by the nuts and go for it.
I mean, you've said that in a far more positive way I could ever have expressed myself. So thanks for doing that, and I echo that entirely. You are spot on, and you know, hopefully it will transpire that we all have, you know, long and vibrant careers over the next 10, 15 years, and for all those apprentices who are going through the difficult times they are now, they'll get the payback of that, you know, tenfold as we move along in time. That's the hope for everybody. You know, once we're all allowed back out into wider society as normal human beings again, you know, it'd be nice to see, wouldn't it? And before we close out on this podcast, I've asked this question to a lot of people, and it's a bit of a fun one rather than something too serious. And I started out with £100 budget, and I've had to up it to 200 because it's not 1995 anymore. But if you were suggesting a kit that apprentices might look at as they're first starting out, as they're coming into the electrical industry, just a basic set that they might want to put in their hands to have ready for starting work out on site, what would you be suggesting they look at?
Well, now tools for me is a fantastic subject, right? But here's what I've learned over the years, guys, right? I would rather spend that £200 on a really decent set of snips, and that's it. If I just get that one amazing tool and it lasts me forever, that's what I'm spending my money on. I've learned the hard way. I've bought the cheap stuff, right? I've bought snips that have fell apart. I bought snips that won't cut cable. I've bought screwdrivers where the insulations fell off. No, I mean, I think my last set of snips I paid like 78 quid for, but they are amazing. And it's like cutting through butter, and I'm like Edward Scissorhands with them, you know? It's like... I'm like a maestro. I do actually still do some electrical work, by the way, Mark. I'm not 100% keyboard warrior, like. But yeah, I'd rather spend all the money on one or two really, really good tools than buy a range of absolute rubbish that's going to fall apart in a couple of years. I mean, I've got tools in my toolbox from 2007, which are still going strong, and I think they'll outlive me, to be honest. So that's what I'd spend it on.
Good advice. I mean, you can't replace quality, can you? And as a lot of these apprentices have realised, when you end up at our kind of age and even beyond that some of the tools stick around with you for decades. They could become part of your person. So if you can get some quality gear right from the outset, great shout, good advice. Before we do leave this podcast, where can people find you, Craig, if they want to find out a little bit more about your services and what you offer, or if they want to connect and engage with you on social media? Where can they look you up?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. The company's Craig Wiltshire Assessment Services. I'm purely freelance now. I don't think I'll ever sort of get tied to a college again. I was offered a job the other day, and good money and everything, but I don't respond well to authority, to be honest. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and just have a little Google at Craig Wiltshire Assessment Services, and that's where we are.
Fantastic. And I'll pop a link to all of Craig's profiles in the description of this podcast. So if you're listening on Podbean, I'll pop it in there. And if you're watching on YouTube, on there as well. And I just want to thank Craig again for coming on and chatting about such a wide range of issues. I think he's been incredible. So thank you for coming on, Craig. And if you ever want to drop back in and have a chat about anything in particular, just let me know. You're welcome back anytime. And I think we should have a chat about this apprenticeship union going forward, because I'd love to be involved in something like that myself. So thanks again.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks for everything you've done. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, bye now.